22,000 feet of sacred stone that no one has ever climbed. Not because they can't, but because the mountain won't let them. Compasses spin wildly, storms appear from nowhere, and those who venture too high seem to age years in a single day. Welcome to the In-Between. I'm Caroline, and today we're unraveling the mysteries of Mount Kailash. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know we are quite fond of triangles. But today, we're going to switch things up a bit and instead look at what is probably the world's most mysterious rectangle. That's right! This mysterious four-sided wonder, better known as Mount Kailash, Kailash Parvat, or the Stairway to Heaven, has been a focal point of the Himalayan mountain range for centuries. Maybe not the focal point. I think that designation rightfully belongs to Mount Everest, but a focal point in its own right. Now, if you're like me, I'd never heard of this place until it was brought to my attention by a couple of our in-betweeners. So, let me catch everyone up to speed. Mount Kailash is a pyramid-shaped mountain in the Trans-Himalayan range in southwestern Tibet, which is a mountain range that runs parallel to the Himalayas, just north of where Tibet, Nepal, and India all meet. As mountains go, it's tall, standing at 21,778 feet or 6,638 meters, so well above the need extra oxygen zone. But don't be too impressed. It doesn't even make the top 100 list of tallest mountains. And despite its sheer appearance, it's been rated as not the most difficult to climb. It's kind of a meh mountain. So why has no one ever made it to the top? Close to 7,000 people have summited Everest, and it's 50% taller. Well, the answer is pretty simple. Because Mount Kailash doesn't want you to. Pretty bold statement, I know, but there is enough high strangeness surrounding this place that I think it just might be true. First of all, it loves the number 4. The mountain has 4 faces that face each direction of the compass, north, south, east, and west, almost perfectly. It is the source of 4 major rivers that come from each of those directions. The Indus River, which flows north, the Sutlej, which flows west, the Brahmaputra, which flows east, and the Karnali River, which flows south, turning into the Ganges. And it is the holiest of holy places for 4 religions, 3 of which are in the top 10 largest faiths. Hindus believe this is the home of the god of destruction, Shiva, and his wife Parvati. Buddhists believe that it is the residence of the embodiment of supreme bliss, the Buddha Demchok. Jains, another ancient Indian religious group, believe that the first Jain to reach enlightenment, Rishabhanatha, did so here. For the Bon people, the mountain is the home of their sky goddess, Sipamin. And all 4 believe that the mountain serves as a gateway between heaven and earth, and that it is the center of the universe, or what they call the axis mundi. The Hindus say they can actually see the face of Shiva on the side of the mountain. And a swastika, which has long been a symbol of life, good fortune, and eternity for all 4 religions, is said to appear on the south face when the sun sinks low enough in the sky. Not to mention that on the top of the mountain, the snow pattern takes the shape of Om, the most important symbol in the Hindu religion, representing supreme, absolute consciousness. Om. Yeah, that Om. But let's leave the spiritual for a moment and turn to the more scientific. Mount Kailash is actually made of something called black rock, which is a nickname for the dark metamorphic rock, gneiss, and schist that make up the majority of the mountain. But interestingly, Kailash's rock is different from the rocks making up its neighbors. Many trekkers report that compasses are useless because the needle just spins around, and there isn't really any plant life to speak of. The higher elevations of its neighbors don't have any either, but at least they have some plant life closer to their bases, whereas Kailash has nothing. Also, Kailash's south side has more snow than the north side. Most south-facing mountains, at least those in the northern hemisphere, have less snow due to their exposure to the sun. But just the opposite seems to be true on Kailash. In 2015, Dr. Rajesh Kumar and his team on a joint research project between India and Nepal found unusually high levels of negative ion concentrations around the mountain, which they say might contribute to the resilience and health of both the flora and the fauna of the surrounding area, in spite of the harsh conditions. Chinese researchers found that pilgrims climbing the mountain experience fewer symptoms of altitude sickness than expected, and other studies show minor wounds heal faster. Japanese studies discuss large-scale formations on the mountain's surface that can't be explained by natural phenomena. An International Geological Congress team discovered anomalies within the mountain's internal structure. I have no idea what those anomalies are, but in 2012, Russian scientist Dr. Sergei Kuchikov found that the mountain has an unusually high magnetic field, powerful enough that it can disrupt compasses and other electronic devices. He thinks these magnetic anomalies might come from unknown materials within the mountain itself. In 2016, Chinese professor Zhang Libai replicated the Russian study's findings, confirming that the magnetic fields inside the mountain are not only strong, but irregularly distributed. His team even detected gravitational anomalies in some areas, which have since been corroborated by even newer research in 2019 and 2021. Attached to Kailash, both geographically and spiritually, are the twin lakes of Manasorovar and Rakshas Tal. I call them the twin lakes because they sit right next to each other, but they are anything but.
We're twins.
That's right.
They're more like yin and yang. Manasorovar is one of the world's highest freshwater lakes, full of aquatic life, with a surface that is almost always smooth and peaceful. Its constant intake of melting glacial water means it never freezes over, no matter how cold it gets. Rakshas Tal, also known as the Demon Lake, is a saltwater lake with no life and a surface that is almost always full of waves. It does get fed fresh water from Manasorovar through a small channel, but it is an endorheic lake, meaning it has no outlets. So these two lakes are just complete opposites of each other, even though they sit right next to each other. Manasorovar is thought of as the light and Rakshas Tal the dark. Tradition holds that if you're on your way to Mount Kailash for a spiritual pilgrimage, you must first stop and cleanse yourself in the peaceful waters of Manasorovar. I wonder what happens if you make a mistake and scrub up in the Demon Lake instead. And people camping near these lakes have claimed to hear strange voices, and wailing will echo around, and there are often mysterious splashes or the sounds of something moving in the water, and that the ghosts of past sages can be seen bathing in the lake. A completely different kind of weirdness lies in the fact that Mount Kailash supposedly sits exactly 6,666 kilometers from Stonehenge and the North Pole, and exactly twice that distance, or 13,332 kilometers, from the South Pole. But let's get back to whether or not Kailash is climbable. It's not that people haven't tried to climb it. That's the problem. They have, they just can't seem to get to the top. In 1926, Hugh Rutledge, Colonel R.C. Wilson, and their Sherpa, Seaton, made their way around the base looking for a place to climb up the mountain. Seaton tells the men the southeast ridge is climbable. So the men say, "Great, let's go." They start climbing. When they get about 1,500 feet from the top, the weather changes on a dime, and they have no choice but to climb back down. And the weather stays bad until they are off that mountain. Then it clears up. In 1936, Herbert Tichy rolls on up, wanting to climb it. When he asks the locals whether Kailash is climbable, their response was, "Only a man entirely free of sin could climb Kailash. And he wouldn't have to actually scale the sheer walls of ice to do it. He'd just turn himself into a bird and fly to the summit. Editor's note: there is no clarification as to whether good Sir Tichy tried to climb or just turned around and went home. There isn't a lot of information from the 30s to the 80s, but keep in mind that when the Chinese took over Tibet in the 1950s, they didn't let anyone into the area, so no one could get close enough to climb it. Those restrictions were relaxed over time, but in the 1980s, China made climbing Kailash a no-no for real, with the occasional exception for scientific purposes, out of respect for the wishes of the over billion people who see the mountain as a sacred place. But of course, since they made the rules, they can break the rules. And in the early 80s, they decided to take a stab at flying a helicopter of scientists over the mountain to study it. Reports say that the trip there was great, filled with spectacular views, but again, the weather unexpectedly turned sour. Their instruments went nuts and forced the helicopter to retreat. Supposedly, this is what led to the Chinese government declaring the area around Kailash as restricted airspace. Around 1985, the Chinese extended an invitation to world-renowned mountaineer Reinhold Messner. Now, just in case you don't know who this guy is, he's an Italian mountaineer who was the first person to solo climb Everest, the first guy to climb Everest without oxygen, and the first guy to summit all 14 mountains over 8,000 meters, or 26,247 feet, known in the climbing community as the 14 8,000ers, all of them without oxygen, just to name a few things off of his resume.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Messner accepted the invitation, came to Tibet, and explored the Kailash area for a while, but declined the offer to actually summit the mountain due to its religious significance, saying, "If we conquer this mountain, then we conquer something in people's souls." Now, rumor has it that also in the 80s, a group of Americans attempted to summit the mountain. According to the story, within just a few hours of starting their ascent, they noticed that their hair and fingernails were growing at an accelerated rate. Understandably freaked out, they said, "Screw this," turned around and headed back down. By the time they reached the bottom, their hair was allegedly stark white and they had visibly aged years. In 1999, award-winning and well-published scientist Dr. Ernst Moldyshev led an expedition of experts in geology, physics, and history organized by the Russian Geographical Society to Tibet to explore Mount Kailash. In preparation for the expedition, apparently he chatted with a Siberian climbing team that had recently tried to summit Kailash and also experienced this rapid aging process. And the story goes that they all died of old age within a year after their return. As far as Dr. Moldyshev's expedition goes, according to him, they didn't grow old or anything, but they heard some weird sounds coming from inside the mountain, like something or someone was living inside. In an academic paper he published about the trip and his experiences, Moldyshev says, "In the silence of the night, there often were strange gasping sounds in the belly of the mountain. One night, both my colleagues and I distinctly heard the noise of a falling stone that undoubtedly came from the interior." Moldyshev became absolutely convinced that Mount Kailash was not a regular mountain, but instead a huge hollowed-out pyramid created by ancient superhumans, and that Mount Kailash is surrounded by smaller pyramids, and that all of them have a connection to the pyramids in Giza and Teotihuacan. And he's not the only researcher to come to this conclusion. Summarizing his thoughts on Mount Kailash, Moldyshev wrote, "It's hard for me to discuss this topic from a scientific point of view, but I can quite positively say that the Kailash complex is directly related to life on Earth." What he's talking about is the Tibetan legend of a city called Shambhala, or City of the Gods, a place where only the purest of heart can find the way. According to legend, the city is a kind of reservoir of the human gene pool that preserves the genes of people from ancient civilizations. And Moldashev was convinced it existed underneath Kailash. Moldashev is not the first person to think that Mount Kailash has to be the gateway to, or at least a beacon for, Shambhala. In Buddhism, Shambhala, mythical kingdom of enlightenment and peace, is hidden somewhere in the Himalayan region. Kailash and the area surrounding has been studied pretty thoroughly by the Chinese, who found an extensive system of tunnels in the mountain's base. Not that unusual. Lots of mountains have evidence of past volcanic activity, except Kailash was not created by volcanic activity. The entire Himalayan and trans-Himalayan ranges are a result of tectonic plate movement, with the Indian plate crashing into the Eurasian plate. Maybe the tunnels being the entrance to Shambhala isn't such a far-fetched idea. In 2001, a Spanish team requested to climb the peak. China says nope. And in 2007, Russian climber Sergei Kistikov and his team were granted permission. They get to the mountain and get ready to climb. But as soon as he's standing in front of the mountain, ready to take his first steps of the ascent, his heart starts to pound in his chest. Here he is, the same place so many before him have failed. He feels weak and terrified he's going to fail, that the magic of the sacred place will be stronger than he is. Well, maybe he's just psyching himself out. So he and his buds start to climb. Within just a couple of hours, they all start getting headaches. Not exactly a surprise when you're up that high and the oxygen is so thin, so they just bite the bullet and keep climbing. But the headaches don't go away. Instead, the climbers' legs start to feel heavy and hard to move, and they can barely crawl. And this isn't even the tough part of the climb yet. Sergei feels extremely weak and becomes fixated on the idea that they have to go back down, that they don't belong here. He decides to turn around and go back down. But when he tries to let his teammates know that he's going back, he can't talk. His jaw is completely locked shut. Well, his mates must have all had the same thought, because they all turn around and start going back down. And as soon as they do, Sergei feels all of his muscles relaxing, and a sensation of freedom and weightlessness washes over him. And he feels this strong energy of beneficence, of goodwill envelop him. So much so that by the time he gets back down the mountain, he doesn't give a crap about failing to summit the mountain. He's just high on life. Later, Sergei writes, "I am convinced that the warnings of Tibetan writings are not mere figments, and the experiences that dozens of climbers have experienced over the years are not just coincidences. There are too many indications signal that here lies a mystery. Most likely, a man is not yet ready to understand." And Sergei is not the only one to feel the wrath of Mount Kailash for daring to climb her. Other hikers have reported similar feelings of illness, unexplained rainstorms and blizzards. Some climbers have even reported that while they were hiking up the mountain, they all of a sudden figure out that they're hiking down the mountain, like the mountain had turned around right under their feet without them even knowing it. Now, to be fair, there is one story of one person making it to the top of Mount Kailash, an 11th century Buddhist monk named Milarepa. The legend says that Milarepa is confronted by Naro Bonchung, a follower of the Bon religion, which, if you remember, is one of the 4 religions that hold Mount Kailash sacred. So here is Milarepa and Naro Bonchung both wanting to prove that their religion is the best religion. So they decide to race to the summit of Mount Kailash. The winner would prove the superiority of their spiritual practice. Naro Bonchung uses his magical drum to ascend the mountain, while Milarepa relies on his profound meditative powers. As Naro Bonchung nears the summit, Milarepa pauses, then swiftly soars up to the top using the power of his meditation. To mark his victory and respect the sacredness of Kailash, Milarepa does not step foot on the summit. Instead, he leaves a handprint in the rock as a sign of his presence and ultimate victory. Milarepa's actions symbolize humility and reverence for the sacred teaching that Mount Kailash is not a place for human domination, but for spiritual enlightenment. So today, instead of trying to climb the mountain, pilgrims come from all over the world to embark on what is called the Kailash Kora, a 32-mile hike all the way around the base of the mountain. It is said that one trip around dissolves a lifetime of sins. 108 trips around secures the path to nirvana. Now, what would this video be without at least mentioning the one, the only...
Welcome to the Himalayas!
That's right! Our good friend Yeti, also known as the Abominable Snowman. In 1951, about 375 miles southwest down the road from Mount Kailash, a mountaineer by the name of Eric Shipton would snap a photograph that would go down into the annals of Bigfoot history. The photograph is a beautifully crisp, clear photo of a roughly 13-inch footprint in the snows of the Himalayas. Eric wasn't there to find evidence of Yeti. He and his mates were there to find a route to the top of Everest from Nepal. In fact, the things they learned from this expedition helped Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay make the first successful recorded ascent of Mount Everest 2 years later in 1953. But motivations aside, there they were staring down at this huge, weird, human-looking print. So they took pictures. Pictures that are still the subject of heated debate today. Are they real? I don't know. I was 100% in until I saw this picture. But before I show it, I feel I must give an obligatory gnarly warning, because there's no other way to describe these feet as anything but gnarly. This is a picture of the feet of a Nepalese Highlander with a foot abnormality that makes all his toes go wonky. Now, if you look at the Shipton picture again, looks a little different, right? And I hear you barking.
Caroline, someone would have to be barefoot to make that track.
Yup. And guess what? People living in cold conditions can develop something called cold-induced vasodilation, where the blood vessels in the arms and legs and hands and feet dilate in cycles when exposed to the cold. So they open up for a while, letting warm blood reach those parts, then constrict back down for a while, then open back up again. So now that I know about that, I'm not so sure about the footprint. The prevailing not Bigfoot theory is that it's a regular print that has been enlarged by melting from the sun. Except, being from Minnesota, I can tell you what happens to footprints as they melt in the sun. That ain't it. Melting footprints don't get bigger uniformly like the one in this picture. They start melting around the top edges, especially on whatever edge the sun is hitting it. So it looks like it's spreading out. But this print looks crisp. I don't think that's melting going on there. And there are certainly more pictures of unknown things captured in the region and plenty of stories to go with them. From Pliny the Elder, a Roman author who wrote about a creature similar to a Yeti seen in India around 300 BC. This account is among the earliest recorded mentions of such a creature. To the 1960s in Nepal, when Sonam Hisha Sherpa encountered a Yeti while tending to her yaks in the mountains. An 8-foot-tall creature attacked her, hurling her to the ground and killing 2 of her yaks. Edmund Hillary himself saw tracks, while his compadre Tenzing Norgay actually saw a tall, hairy creature walking upright in 1954. And now that the debunking door has been opened just a little bit, let's just throw it open and take a look at some of the other things we've talked about so far, going all the way back to the beginning with the mountain itself. First of all, The idea that it is 6,666 kilometers from both Stonehenge and the North Pole, it's not really accurate. It's actually 6,934 kilometers from Stonehenge and 6,562 from the North Pole, and 13,443 to the South Pole instead of the 13,332 that it's supposed to be. They're close, I'll give them that, but the precision of the claim is just not there. Now let's talk about the idea that this is a man-made pyramid because of the perfectly aligned sides. Well, I gotta say, if this was a pyramid built by men, then they certainly sent the B team for this one. Yes, the sides roughly coordinate with the 4 cardinal directions, but when you see it from the top, you can see that it's far from being even close to resembling any of the other man-made pyramids we talk about today. We also talked about how the south face gets more snow than the north face, which is the opposite of what it should be. Well, turns out that the Indian monsoon clouds head this direction every year with warm, moist air. When those clouds hit the south face, they get forced upward, condensing the moisture in the colder air and dump their snow on the south face before they can make their way over the top. So basically, many of you have heard of lake effect snow. Well, this is monsoon effect snow. Okay, let's talk about airplanes not being able to fly over Kailash's airspace. First of all, that airspace is not restricted airspace. The planes just choose not to fly there. And there certainly could be something funky going on with compasses, but the real reason airplanes don't fly there is because the ground is sitting too high. The Himalayan region is nicknamed the roof of the world. That's because if you were to shave off all of the mountains, the ground at the bottom is still sitting at a staggering roughly 12,000 feet above sea level. So if an airplane cabin loses pressure and the oxygen masks come down from the ceiling, pilots have about 15 to 20 minutes to get that plane down to under 10,000 feet before that oxygen runs out. Well, if you're flying over the area where Kailash is located or anywhere in the Himalayan, Trans-Himalayan range, your options for finding a safe place to land that plane in the next 15 minutes are pretty limited. So pilots do the safe thing and just go around. Okay, let's go back to the mountain itself. The swastika? I tried as hard as I could, but I don't even see it. Maybe it's easier to see at different times of the day, but in my humble opinion, that one is really a stretch. The face of Shiva? Okay, I can see a face there. To me, it's an obvious case of pareidolia, but hey, you do you. At least there's something to see on this one. As far as the Om symbol on the top, well, again, pareidolia. But this one is so cool looking that I prefer to think of it as a happy accident. One thing scientists have not been able to account for is the fact that Mount Kailash is made of different material than all of its neighbors. Now, the really bad news is that I can't find anything to substantiate the claims made about the research expeditions. However, that could be just because I didn't have the right spelling of the names, or because Google seems to be only returning search results that are politically correct. I don't know. Some of the actual stories are pretty widely circulated by people who are real with Wikipedia pages and everything. But some of them, like the 2 teams that experienced rapid aging, are widely circulated but have nothing to back them up. So those kind of have to fall into the legend category. But since we have nothing to lose at this point, let's take a closer look at the rapid aging phenomena. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, time is not the same everywhere you go. According to him, the closer you are to Earth, the slower time moves. And powerful gravitational and energy fields can cause distortions in the flow of time. Okay, if we take that at face value, I still doubt that the height, the the climbers were at would be high enough to age them decades in a span of hours. However, if you add in quantum electrodynamics and the magnetic monopole theory, people way smarter than me say these theories show how magnetism can disrupt time itself. I'm not even going to pretend to know how that works. But if that 2012 research conducted by Dr. Sergei Kuchikov and the 2016 research conducted by Professor Jean Labai that found that the mountain has unusually high but random magnetic fields, if that's real, maybe those climbing teams just hit the mountain on a bad magnetic day. So where does all of this information leave us? Is the magic of Mount Kailash real or merely legendary? Well, I have to say that as far as evidence goes, there's not really much to go on. I'm not one of those people who buy into mathematical equations written down on paper as proof of something actually existing. And that's about all we have, other than a collection of disparate research and anecdotal stories. However, I did see a testimonial from a person who traveled to the mountain, not even on a true pilgrimage, but more of a sightseeing adventure. And he said the moment he stepped foot off that bus and looked at that mountain, his spiritual existence was changed at its very core. So who knows? Maybe that big, beautiful black and white rock is magical. And if you take the journey to see it, it might just rock your world too. Special thanks to Granville Graves 6522, Bronson Brown 8300, and DJ Joey D 1167 for suggesting this topic. I love that you guys throw these topics at me that I've never heard of, and I get to go diving into new rabbit holes and learning all kinds of new things. I love my job. If you want to charge headfirst into a new rabbit hole of your own, click right here. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.